Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. I'm Indie Tiger and we're talking about my thoughts on Star Trek Strange New Worlds Season 2, Episode 3, Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. If you haven't seen the episode and you don't want to be spoiled, this is your spoiler warning. Go watch the episode and please come back. The plot goes this way. La'an Noonien Singh is Khan Noonien Singh's descendant. We know Khan from Wrath of Khan and from Space Seed, the original series, and he's an augment and she's an augment, and her whole life she's been put upon, teased, called bad names because she is an augment. And so she's walking in the corridor, and when there's a sudden flash of light and this person shows up, they've been shot with a bullet, and it turns out they're a time agent, and he has a device that he hands to her, and he dies, and he says, and just before he dies he says, "Get to the bridge." So she goes immediately to the bridge, where this version of Captain Kirk says, "Excuse me, ma'am, what are you doing on my bridge?" And then he gets immediately distracted. Now, it turns out that this is an alternate reality to La'an's reality, where the Federation does not exist, and the Romulans are at war with United Earth on one hand, and also the Vulcans on another hand. And Kirk is distracted by Captain Spock of the Vulcan fleet calling to ask for help. And when Kirk says no, Spock says, "There's an old Earth adage that says the enemy of my enemy is my friend." And Kirk says, "Yeah, maybe in some other circumstance, but not in this case. We have our own problems to deal with, so sorry, I can't help you." Now, the reason I say this is not the Kirk that we know is because he's so casual about having this stranger on board his ship, on his bridge. He doesn't call for security, and so it's like, this guy is not the Captain Kirk that we know. I mean, he is polite. Kirk is usually polite, but the original series Kirk would call for security right away when he sees some random woman show up that he doesn't know. And so this guy is not the Kirk that we know from the original series. I don't even think he's the Kirk that we know from the 2009 reboots. So he's an alternate version of Kirk. Getting into what's good about the episode, this is another tightly scripted episode. There are some things about the script that bother me, and we'll get into those later. But it is another very straightforward story. It's time travel. Kirk and La'an go into his ready room, and she's explaining what has happened to her. Is she's from a different reality, and this time traveling agent who died in front of her handed her this device. And Kirk is like, "Yeah, that could be an explanation of where you come from, or it could just be that you're crazy. And my engineer will study the device that you have, just hand it over, and we'll start to investigate your story." She doesn't want to hand it over, and they struggle for the device. I think it's Kirk who actually presses the button, and they're transported back in time to 21st century Toronto, where they are now on this mission that she has assigned to them. Essentially, she says, look, we're here for a reason. That time travel agent came to me for a reason, and he must have thought you could help me. That's why you're here as well. So we have to restore my timeline. Well, Kirk has some really good information here. He's got some good thoughts on the whole idea. First of all, he doesn't necessarily want to initially go along with her because he's alive. He's the captain of the Enterprise, and there's no reason why he should want to upset his own timeline in his mind. Well, she says, well, in your timeline, Earth is a cinder, it's uninhabitable. You are at war where you could be an explorer. He's like, I don't even know if I live in your timeline. Going back to season 1, Sam Kirk is on board the Enterprise. La'an knows him, and she knows that Kirk is alive in their timeline as well, in her timeline. So she convinces him that it's a good thing that he help her. So there's some really good objections there on Kirk's part, and there's some really good arguments on her part for him to help her out with this mission that she's decided they're on. One of the interesting things that I noticed, and I'm not usually big on this sort of thing, but the delta is not the delta on his uniform. It's a different symbol on his uniform. Everything else about it is the same. The same number of stripes, the same gold, the same collar and turtleneck underneath. So that's pretty cool. That subtle difference, because he's not part of the Federation. There is no Federation. He's part of United Earth, and United Earth has a different symbol, and that symbol is whatever this kind of, it's almost like a monolith, which is interesting. I don't know. I'm wondering if that's supposed to be a callback to the Preservers. It might be. Something else that I like about the episode is, they're in Toronto. It's the 21st century. They've stolen their clothes. They managed to steal their clothes by getting somebody else in trouble and then walking out while the alarms are going off. But they can't do it again, right? La'an says we can't do this again. And they're like, we have to find a way to make money. And Kirk says, what 21st marketable skills do you have? And before she has a chance to respond, he looks over and he sees people in the park playing chess for money. And he's like, give me a few minutes. And he starts hustling people playing chess. We know Kirk is a great chess player. And we know that he's a great strategist. We've seen this in the original series. It's well established. So that's a nice little bit of continuity between this alternate reality Kirk and the Kirk that we know. So I do like that. We'll be talking about this again later because there's some things that I don't like about this scene as well. But for now, I like it. It's a good bit of continuity for Kirk. And so far, the story is going along rather well. I do like the overall episode, as I say, and so as the story progresses, and remember the time travel agent told La'an to get to the bridge. Well, the next day there's a bridge that blows up, okay? And that's the bridge that the time travel agent is talking about. So that's a nice little bit of a little bit of a red herring, but it gets Kirk involved. So I do like that. I do also like the fact that because Earth is uninhabitable, you know, this version of James T. Kirk is born in space, but he's born on the USS Iowa. And so I think, okay, that's pretty cool. So he's still born in Iowa. It's just instead of being born in the state of Iowa, he's actually born on the starship named Iowa. So that's kind of cool. So, as I say, they are going to. The bridge blows up the next day, and they go to investigate, and they see something that leads them to believe that it's time travel agents who blew up the bridge, and they run into this woman who is taking photographs, and she's like, and La'an goes up to her and says, "Can we see those pictures?" And she shows them the pictures, and she says, and La'an says, "I recognize the scorch marks here. This is not something that they have, the explosive device is a photonic device. It's not something they have in this timeline, in this time period." So they follow the guys, and they end up losing the guys who take this debris away, and they get caught by the police because Kirk steals a car. This is another kind of interesting. It's almost a callback to the original series, but not quite. Kirk has trouble driving a car at the beginning. In the episode A Piece of the Action, he has real trouble driving a car to the point where Spock actually says something about him being a bad driver. And so Kirk is like, "Really?" And they're like, "Yeah." But he has trouble at the beginning trying to get the car in gear, but then later on he's driving it like he's a NASCAR driver, which is interesting. So, but he gets caught by the police. The girl who is taking the photographs, she jumps in and she starts, making up all this bullshit about him being a civil rights lawyer, and why are they profiling an American civil rights lawyer, and do you really want to do this? And a cop say, "Okay, we're going to let you off with a warning." And she turns out to be a conspiracy theorist, and they go and they get some poutine, and she's showing them pictures, and there's a picture of a Romulan bird of prey on her pad. And so that's kind of a cool thing. And she's like, and Kirk is like, "Where did you get this picture?" And she's like, "From an astronomer who was trying to take a picture of something and caught this instead." And Kirk is like, goes to La'an, because La'an doesn't know what a Romulan bird of prey looks like, but Kirk does, because they've been fighting in his alternate reality with the Romulans, so obviously he can recognize a Romulan bird of prey, and he says to La'an, "That's a Romulan bird of prey." So this girl is really on to something. And the girl's like, "Thank you for listening." They split up, and the girl's like, "Thanks for listening. A lot of people just think I'm a kook, but I really appreciate you listening to me." And so that's pretty cool. That's a good little bit of conversation. And again, this Romulan bird of prey is very reminiscent of the original series Bird of Prey, so I like that especially. I don't think it's exactly the same. It's hard to tell with the photograph that's on that pad, but it's pretty close. Something else that's really interesting is they go to Vermont to visit Pelia, who is the engineer of the Enterprise in Strange New Worlds. After Hemmer has died, who was the season 1 chief engineer, now Pelia is the chief engineer, played by Carol Kane, and she's living in Vermont at this time, and La'an remembers that she's living in Vermont because La'an was inventorying all of her stuff, and half of the things are stolen because she's just a pack rat. She's a lanthanide living among humans for thousands of years without being detected, and she's like a pack rat. She's stolen a bunch of stuff. They go and find her in Vermont, and they're looking for a way to determine to find a cold fusion reactor that's in the city of Toronto, which the girl said is there earlier when they were talking to her, and so they're like, we don't need you to build a cold fusion reactor because Pelia at this time is not an engineer. La'an thinks she is an engineer, that's why they go to Vermont. But they're like, we don't need you to build us a cold fusion reactor. We just need something that can detect one of the byproducts of cold fusion. And apparently one of the byproducts of cold fusion is tritium. And tritium phosphoresces reacts to phosphor. And so it lights up, and Pelia is like, you mean like in diver's watches? From 30 years ago, they used to light up, but now they don't because the tritium ran out, and that's actually a real thing. So I like that bit of science in the story. So that's actually something that is a real thing, and so that's pretty cool. So the big twist, the big reveal is they've found this cold fusion device. They found the building that the cold fusion device is in, and they've determined this is where the timeline split between Kirk's United Earth and the United Federation of Planets, because Kirk remembers the cold fusion device being destroyed and taking out Toronto, and La'an doesn't. So that's where the split occurs in the timeline, and so that's why they've looked for this cold fusion device, and that's why they found it. Then the reveal comes that the girl they've been talking to all this time is actually a Romulan time agent, and her mission is to blow up that cold fusion device to slow down the human race, because apparently humans are particularly bad for the Romulans. I guess because they're the ones who actually started the United Federation of Planets, and they're the ones who are really good at fighting the Romulans. I mean, you see it again in the original series with Kirk, in Balance of Terror, and again in the Enterprise incident and the Deadly Years. Kirk is especially good at fighting Romulans, and she actually calls him out. She's like, yeah, I know who you are, and I'll be happy to kill you. So she actually does kill him, and she's like, hey, at least I got the satisfaction of killing James T. Kirk. So it's a great reveal there. You don't suspect her. I didn't suspect her anyway of being a Romulan time agent. So I think that was a great reveal. And so they are at the Noonien Singh Institute for Advanced Research, or whatever it's called. So La'an, being a Noonien Singh, can open the doors and get them inside. She goes inside. She's like, you're not going to be able to blow up the cold fusion reactor now. Why are you even trying? And the Romulan time agent says, oh, I have a plan B. I'll just kill Khan. And Khan apparently is a little boy at this time, and La'an is like, I can't let you do that. And the Romulan time agent has a really good, really persuasive argument to say, hey, you can live your life without being without having the albatross of Noonien Singh being a curse word in your century, because you have that device, you have the time travel device on you that protects you from changes in the timeline. As soon as I kill Khan, you can go back to your future and be Laan Noonien Singh and not have the stigma of the name Noonien Singh, because he's no longer going to be a part of the eugenics wars in World War III. And Laan is like, she's really tempted at this point. It's near the end of the episode. She's really tempted, but she ends up saving Khan and killing the Romulan time agent who she shoots the Romulan time agent, and then watching carefully, I think that the Romulan time agent has some device on her that actually immolates her. So if you watch the episode closely, I think you'll see that. So that's what's good about the episode. It's another tight episode. Not a lot of fluff. It's a really compelling story, and I really enjoyed it. That it went by really quickly. But there are some things that I do not like about the episode. And so moving into the ugly. Now, originally I said I like this scene where Kirk is hustling people at chess, and I do like it. But there's a couple of things that I also don't like about this scene. And one of the things is, at the end of hustling a few people out of some money, Kirk says, oh, that 2D stuff, it's just idiot's chess. Really? Idiot's chess? I've played chess. I'm not good at it, I admit. Are the writers good at playing chess? Are you expert chess level people? I mean, why does Kirk have to insult 2D chess? Do the writers actually play 3D chess and are really, grandmasters of 3D chess? Why do you got to do that? It serves no purpose to the story other than to make Kirk sound like a jerk. Kirk is a jerk. And that's not something that we see often in Star Trek. Yeah, every once in a while he can be a bit of a jerk, but just why insult chess? There are people who are grandmasters who are probably watching this episode who are like, why? It's really purposeless, and it's just pissing me off. That's me pretending to be a grandmaster of chess, which I am definitely not. Something else about this is Kirk hustles maybe $100, $200 off of people, but they end up in this really beautiful hotel room. Much better than the picture I have here, but honestly, I had a real hard time finding just a picture that I could download of a hotel room, because every time I searched for Toronto hotels or photos of Toronto hotels, it didn't just show me pictures. It took me to booking sites, and I'm not trying to book a hotel room in Toronto at this point. So it's like, you get what you get, right? Sometimes you just gotta live with what you can get. But the Toronto hotel room that they show in the episode is probably $500 a night, and that's the fact that Kirk has probably hustled like $200 out of people at best and yet they end up in a $500 hotel room is kind of setting unreasonable expectations in my mind. And so I don't think it's realistic that they would do that. That they should have put them into probably a hotel room like this where it's $100 a night or $150 a night. It's only for one night. So I don't I that rubs me the wrong way just a little bit. Now something else that rubs me the wrong way is they could have picked any two cities in the world to be in. They picked Toronto probably for practical reasons because that's where they shoot the episodes is probably in Toronto. But then why put Pelia in Vermont? That's a one-way trip by car is more than 7 hours. It's like 7 hours and 20 minutes. And they're on a time crunch. You know, they know what's going to happen. They have a time frame from the time that the bridge explodes to the time that the cold fusion device is destroyed and destroys Toronto. They're on a crunch. So why put Pelia in Vermont, which is 7 hours and 20 minutes one way by car? When you could have picked any two cities, you could have picked Ottawa or Montreal and been much closer to Vermont. Now I understand, like I say, why they picked Toronto for practical purposes, but for in-universe purposes, why Vermont then? Why not Buffalo, New York, which is like an hour and a half by car? That makes so much more sense because they can do it easily in a day, whereas Toronto to Vermont and Vermont back to Toronto is like 15-hour trip. You can't, doing that in a day when you're on a time crunch, that's ridiculous. So writers, put a little bit more thought into what you're writing here. Make it more sensible. Now, again, in the 1960s, this might have gone over most people's heads because, especially Americans, unless you had been to Toronto and been to Vermont by car in the 1960s, you wouldn't know that it's a 7 hour and 20 minute trip. But today, Google Map, you can easily figure it out. I was curious as to how far they were traveling, so I Googled it and I found out it's a 7 hour and 20 minute trip. So it's 15 hours to go from Toronto to Vermont, talk to this woman, Pelia, and then come all the way back. And they're in Vermont for quite a while. According to the dialogue, they're searching for her all over the place. And finally they go to an Apple store, and one of the Apple store employees explains how DuckDuckGo works, and that's how they find her eventually. But originally they think she's working at a university, so they go to all the universities in Vermont apparently. So it's more than a 15-hour trip. But Buffalo, New York, hour and a half, plus a couple of hours searching. It's easily 5 hours. It's doable. It's so much more doable. Excuse me. So I didn't like that about the episode. It doesn't make any sense. So anyway, final thoughts on this episode. It's a good episode. Again, it's very tight. It's a very tight script, except for those couple of things that I mentioned about about traveling and why Kirk has to insult 2D chess. You guys know I'm no expert on storytelling, but I do know that if you're telling a story, everything that is said should serve a purpose. And some of these things just don't serve a purpose at all. They just don't. So be a little bit more thoughtful in what you're writing, okay? Again, overall, it's a good episode. We know that this is an alternate Kirk for the reasons that I explained. And one of the nice things about this episode, I think the overarching message, which I kind of didn't get to until right now, is let's not fuel hate, right? It's very subtle in the story. Let's not fuel hate. Maybe it's subtle to me. Maybe it's very obvious to you guys who know more about storytelling than I do. But getting, the whole idea of these terrorist attacks, according to the Romulan time agent, ironically, is that they're trying to sow division between all these government entities, all these governments, and between the government and the citizenry. They're trying to sow division, and they're trying to slow down Earth in terms of their technological development. And so that is something that it's a good message. We should be trying to cooperate. So I do like that message a lot. We should be trying to get along with everybody else. Now, we can say that, but quite honestly, everybody else has got to be saying that too. There are things that are going on in today's society that, again, it's like one side can't lift both sides up. We've got to get together on these things. We have got to find common ground with everybody and become better, essentially, as human beings. And that's I think that's one of the big messages of this episode. So those are my thoughts. Let me know what yours are in comments below. And if you like this, please like the video, comment. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do so. And share this video with your friends, your family, your neighbors, whoever you want to. And if you do like this episode, if you do like this video, consider checking out some of my other videos. I am close to I think it's in Starfleet. No, it's in Star Trek is the impulse drive an FTL drive. That is close to 600 views. I think we're like 2 away from 600. So I'd like to get that to 600 views. If you haven't seen it, please go watch that if you like this. There's a couple of others that, are close to some like 500 views and 300 views. So please check out my other videos. And like I say, please comment. I love to hear your thoughts. I love to interact with you guys. And if you haven't already, subscribe. Recommend my channel to your friends too, please. And with that, I will say goodnight. And everybody have a great week.